human beings, PowerGamer here. I've been told that this is Twilight Princess Awareness Month, so I'm doing my part in helping spread the word about this game. Given how it has the lowest distinction of any 3D Zelda game, okay, second most, I think it's appropriate to do so. I mean, if there's any gaming franchise that needs more love, it's clearly Zelda.
The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, when Nintendo asks themselves if they can copy their homework. Okay, that might sound a bit harsh, but I think it's pretty hard to deny that they didn't have Ocarina of Time on the mind at all when making this. Hell, it was pretty much made in direct response to what happened with the last 3D Zelda game. Plans for a new 3D Zelda were started as early as 2003, and the next year, director Eiji Aonuma said that it was going to be similar to that of the Wind Waker in terms of design and graphics. But since initial sales of that game were pretty slow in North America due to its cartoony art style, which as we all know was a massive source of contention, Aonuma would later express the idea of making a more realistic Zelda game to Shigeru Miyamoto. He was hesitant at first, wanting to focus more on gameplay revision, so Aonuma suggested working on stuff they tried to do in Ocarina of Time, but couldn't due to hardware limitations, with a particular emphasis on horse combat, to the point where lead character designer Keisuke Nishimori actually tried out horseback riding just to see what it was really like. It's also worth noting that not only was this game coming out at a time when gritty realism was becoming all the rage in gaming, but the mid-2000s were the peak of high fantasy movies being popular with stuff like Harry Potter, Narnia, and especially Lord of the Rings. So those movies were a massive influence on the game's visual style, which was actually kind of fitting given how the original book played a big part in the NES game's concepts. The development team wanted to revisit the concept of traveling between two different worlds, much like in A Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time, and Aonuma came up with the idea of Link turning into a wolf and the surrounding story elements from a dream he had while on a business trip, which is interesting. Aonuma actually stepped away from development for a bit to help work on the Minish Cap, and when he came back, he saw the team was struggling with some of the new concepts. The game was first shown off at E3 2004, and what's often regarded as one of the greatest E3 reveals of all time. Seriously, people went absolutely wild for this trailer. It was insane, to the point where it actually gave us this meme. No, I'm not joking. This was 4 random guys reacting to the Twilight Princess reveal. Now, for all of this, Twilight Princess was intended to be a GameCube game, but around this time, the Nintendo Wii was starting development, and both Aonuma and Miyamoto began brainstorming ideas for what that console's new technology could bring to the table. But they knew they had to finish this game first, so they decided to just release the game on both consoles instead, a process that Zelda would ironically end up repeating with Breath of the Wild, though this meant that it was delayed from its original 2005 release. Developing both versions at the same time was actually pretty simple, since the Wii and GameCube were relatively similar in terms of design and power, though the biggest hurdle they had to overcome was the control scheme. They went through a lot of different design tweaks involving the Wii Remote's motion controls and button inputs, while also dealing with the setup. You see, Link had always held the sword in his left hand up to this point. I don't know why, that's just what he did, but the Wii Remote and Nunchuck combo was largely designed for right-handed players. So to make things more natural, they made Link right-handed, but they didn't just flip his character model around, they literally reversed the entire game. Yeah, everything between left and right on the Wii version is backwards from how it was on the GameCube version, which I believe was due to some of the animations. The game was further shown off at E3 2006, where its dual console release was officially announced, and the hype was absolutely insane. But it finally did release as a launch title for the Wii on November 19th, 2006 in North America, with the GameCube version initially releasing in Japan a couple weeks later on December 2nd alongside the Wii version, and then coming to North America on December 11th. And weirdly, Australia got the Wii version next on December 7th, with Europe getting it on the 8th, but then Europe got the GameCube version on the 11th alongside North America, and then Australia got it on the 15th. I don't know why they did it like this. Either way, the dual console release, with one of those releases being a launch title, really paid off in the long run, since both versions sold a combined total of 8.85 million copies, making it the best-selling game in the series at the time. And this probably ended up being the second best example of the Zelda cycle alongside Ocarina of Time. It was absolutely drenched in praise when it first came out, then people got sick of it, and then people had issues, but now it seems to be pretty well respected. And much like Wind Waker, it got an HD remaster for the Wii U in 2016, which is the version I wanted to look at, but yeah, no, we're sticking with the Wii version, since it's $100 cheaper. Though all this version really added was amiibo support, which could give you a bonus dungeon, and some now completely useless stamps.
Though what I find interesting is that, like I said earlier, this is probably the least distinct 3D Zelda game ever made, or at least it was until Tears of the Kingdom came out. I mean, think about it. Ocarina of Time brought the series into 3D, Majora's Mask had the mask transformations and 3-day time limit, Wind Waker had the sailing and cel-shaded graphics, Skyward Sword had the flying and motion controls, and Breath of the Wild was open world. But Twilight Princess just kinda took what Ocarina of Time did and fleshed it out more. But just because something takes a lot from a previous game doesn't mean it can't still stand out on its own. No, I've never played this game before, but I've heard a decent amount of people say that this is their favorite game in the series. So, will this finally be the one to top the N64 entries for me, or will I end up finding it underwhelming? Time to finally answer that.
Well, if you still weren't sure that this game was trying to capture Ocarina of Time vibes, we literally get an opening cutscene of Link riding Epona, a little too close to this cliff if I might add. Alright, I'll try not to keep bringing this up too much, so I'll just keep a counter every time I can to make a comparison. After naming both the hero as well as the horse, which is neat, we pan into a small village known as Ordon, where we see Link talking with this man named Russell. He says he's supposed to deliver something to the royal family of Hyrule in a couple days, and asks Link if he can do it for him. He tells him about Hyrule, and they head back to the village along with Epona, the horse. Later on, a farmer asks him to help herd some goats, but he needs Epona to do so. We go over to this fountain, where Epona's with the mayor's daughter, Ilya, who's giving her a bath. Ride Epona over to the ranch and use her to put the goats in the shed. The next morning, Link is awoken by his friends Mallow, Tallow, and Beth, who tell him about a slingshot being sold in the village store. After calling a bird and using it to get a lady's baby basket, she gives Link a fishing rod, which you use to catch a fish, and then find this lost cat allowing you to buy the slingshot. Though this initially glitched out on me, and it took way longer than it should have. Link shows off the slingshot to the kids and goes into his house to grab the wooden sword that Russell was fixing. The kids ask him to show off his moves, which is just a glorified tutorial, and then they chase after this monkey into the Faron Woods. After a long trek and buying a lantern from this guy, Link finds Tallow trapped in a cage and breaks him out. The next morning, Link wrangles some more goats and then talks with the mayor before Ilya sees Epona has a slight leg injury and takes her to the spring to heal it. Though to get there, you need to give Mallow and Tallow your sword and speak with Russell's son, Colin, who says he wants to be strong like Link. He takes you to Ilya, who agrees to hand over Epona, but then they're all attacked by these goblin monsters. Link is knocked out and the others are kidnapped as the monsters open the shadowy portal and run off. Link chases after them and finds this weird shadowy wall where a giant hand reaches out and drags him inside. There we see he has the Triforce of Courage, and he transforms into a wolf before collapsing. The thing that grabbed him drags him away, which is observed by this imp girl. Wolf Link awakens in a cell where the imp, whose name is Midna, shows up and teases him, but also helps him get out. She hops on his back and offers to help him escape this place if he does exactly what she says, and he agrees because we literally have no other choice. After climbing their way out of the prison and scaling up the castle, they find this hooded figure who turns out to be Princess Zelda. She says that this place used to be the Kingdom of Hyrule, but it was transformed by the king that rules the Twilight. Apparently, the kingdom was invaded by shadow monsters led by this guy named Zant, who surrounded the kingdom in a dark forest known as Twilight, which turns the people into spirits. Zelda tells them to leave, and outside Minda taunts Link about his friends before sending him back to the spring. After making him steal a sword and a shield from the village, Link heads back to the spring where he meets one of Hyrule's light spirits named Ordana, who explains that Hyrule is at risk of being consumed by darkness and only Link can save it by restoring each of the light guardians. After restoring them, Link returns to his human form with a new set of green clothes. Here he meets the guardian Theron, who says that he must match the forbidden power of the King of Shadows if he's to save Hyrule, and he must find that power inside the different temples. So Link sets out to do so, with Midna tagging along in his shadow, as she agrees to help Link if he helps her find whatever she's looking for.
I know that probably sounded like a lot more information than was needed, but that's because this game takes forever to get going. Seriously, it takes like 2 hours to just get to the first dungeon, assuming you're not skipping anything, and I know it's supposed to be about setting up the characters and stuff, but I don't think it works well because I barely remember any of these people.
But anyways, the story is a pretty typical Zelda affair, collecting things to stop the bad guy. The Twilight stuff is an interesting concept, but all it really boils down to is an explanation for why monsters are everywhere, where Midna and Zant came from, and why Link turns into a wolf. We don't even really go there until the very end of the game. It just kinda infects the world around you, which feels like a missed opportunity, but it does the job fine enough, I guess. The main driving force between the narrative is Midna, who is easily one of the most popular characters in the entire franchise. I mean, she's probably the best travel companion Link has ever had, since she feels like an actual character throughout most of the game, while the other ones were just kind of there, and she's the only one to get any sort of actual development besides Tattle. It's pretty typical, with her starting out really cold and snarky and learning to open up and trust people more as time goes on, but it's still nice to see. Though Zant is honestly a pretty boring villain, since he doesn't really end up doing that much. The game's visuals are probably its most contentious aspect, which is ironic given how they were the thing that got people the most hyped back in the day. But it's not too surprising, since it was trying to be a lot more gritty and realistic, which, while impressive for the time, just makes it look a lot more dated by modern standards, especially when you compare it to Wind Waker, which still looks great all these years later. But while dated, the game still looks fine. The colors are pretty muted, and it can go overboard with the bloom effect sometimes, but there are some solid character designs, and the environments are good enough. And the soundtrack is good, though not some of my favorite music to come from the series. A lot of it feels a little too atmospheric to really be memorable, well, when it's not just reusing Ocarina of Time soundtrack. The gameplay is the traditional Zelda formula we all know by this point, exploring the overworld, talking to people, getting items, and finding dungeons, which have puzzles and enemies. Though the controls have been slightly modified depending on which version you're playing. While the GameCube and Wii versions are similar to that of the Wind Waker, the Wii's versions are honestly closer to the N64 games. You only have one action button, that being the A button, which means throwing and placing items are back on the same button, which is disappointing, and you only directly use one item at a time with the B button. Though thankfully 3 items can be mapped to the D-pad, which can be swapped into the B button slot at any time, and sometimes that's not even required, so that's nice. It's only 3 because hitting up lets you speak with Midna, who can give you hints. Plus the menus are divided into multiple buttons. Plus brings up the standard pause menu, minus brings up your items, and 1 brings up the map. Plus you have a mini-map on screen at all times. But the biggest difference comes from using the sword. Instead of being mapped to a button, you use it by swinging the Wii Remote. And how you swing it doesn't matter at all. What Link does specifically is dependent on outside actions similar to the older games. So when actually playing, you look less like this and more like this. Now, thankfully, this isn't as annoying as it probably sounds. Combat is overall really snappy, and since enemies go down in only a few hits, you won't be shaking it around too much, so it's nowhere near as bad as something like Sonic and the Black Knight, for example. I'm not a huge fan of the motion controls, but they don't really inhibit the game that much. Well, aside from the spin attack, which you do by shaking the nunchuck back and forth, and I don't like this. Though the best thing about the Wii Remote is that you can now use the pointer when aiming stuff like the bow or hookshot, which lets you be way more precise, and I love this. It's like a precursor to using the gyroscope on the 3DS remasters. But speaking of which, Link's arsenal of items is a good blend of old and new. We got most of the major staples like the bow, as well as the slingshot, which quickly gets replaced, bombs, iron boots, the boomerang, and the hookshot, or claw shot as it's called in this game, but a lot of these have been tweaked. The boomerang, which is now called the Gale Boomerang, can lock onto things and create mini tornadoes, which is fun and grossly underutilized. You get 2 claw shots, letting you pull off some really fun tricks, and there's some new types of bombs, like ones you can use underwater, moving ones that I never tried out since you can only carry one type at a time, and you can combine them with the bow to create bomb arrows, which are so much fun to use. For new stuff, we have the fishing pole, that's actually a permanent thing, and you only use it like twice. Plus, the controls are kind of weird since you have to hold the Wii Remote up and then rotate the analog stick, which the game says nothing about. The lantern, which is in 3D for the first time, and you need oil to keep it lit. The spinner, which is a giant top you can ride on, that's fun when it's required, but basically useless everywhere else. The ball and chain, which is literally a giant cannonball you can swing around to smash things and kill enemies with, which is awesome. And the Dominion Rod, which lets you take control of certain statues.
Overall, we get a really solid selection of items, though this game actually does something pretty drastic in that it removes the magic meter.
Yeah, the thing that's been a staple of Zelda, or at least console Zelda, since the second game isn't here, which means no magic spells, Deku Leaf, or even elemental arrows. I'm assuming this was done because the game has a much higher emphasis on physical strength rather than magic powers. This version of Link is definitely the most physically proficient one in the series, since he's able to do things like wrestle goats, shove giant blocks, and even, well, swing around a giant cannonball. And the game also puts more of an emphasis on sword combat, since that is easily the biggest expansion from the previous games. Sword combat was already pretty basic in the Zelda games, aside from stuff like Z-targeting and the parry system. This game doesn't make it super complex, but it does make it a lot quicker. You can dish out attacks way faster in this game than in the previous ones, especially the Wind Waker, which I really appreciate since it keeps the game moving at a much faster pace and makes combat a bit more intuitive. The game even lets you learn secret moves from these night spirits, letting you do all sorts of cool stuff, like delivering a killing blow to a downed enemy instead of just waiting for them to get back up. You can even swing your sword while you're moving instead of just coming to a dead stop, which I also really appreciate. Since this game doesn't have any super big changes like the masks or sailing, they were really able to refine the combat and make it way more fun, which I am a huge fan of. But this game arguably does have one main gimmick, that being Link's new wolf form. Whenever you enter an area consumed by Twilight, Link will transform into a wolf with Midna riding on his back. Now thankfully this controls roughly the same, and you can still attack enemies in a similar way, which just makes the motion controls feel even more tacked on. You can't use any items, but you do have access to some new abilities. You can dig to find extra items or go underground, activate your senses to see hidden objects or follow smells, howl, which is similar to the instrument stuff from the previous games, and if you hold down the B button, you'll create this aura around you and then snap to any enemies that are nearby, though you lose it if you get hit. Plus, if you push the A button, you do a jump attack and can pile on damage faster. And with Midna's help, you can lock onto her and jump across platforms or teleport to certain areas. The way this works is weird though. At certain points of the game, you'll be attacked by these shadow monsters, and to kill them, you have to knock out all of them, but if you leave just one remaining, it'll let out a cry and bring the other ones back. So you gotta leave at least 2 and then kill them both at the same time. I do like the warp feature, but you can only use it in wolf form, which I find kinda ridiculous.
On that note, we can talk more about the exploration aspect of this game.
The sailing from Wind Waker has been completely abandoned, so we're back to roaming around Hyrule Field to explore. Now this place is even bigger than it was in Ocarina of Time, so much so that it's divided into different areas, and to be perfectly honest, it's just as uninteresting, since much like Ocarina, there's barely anything to do here. Aside from a few story elements, all you'll find are random enemies and maybe a few collectibles. Though thankfully, despite the size, getting around isn't much of an issue. In human form, you get Epona fairly early on, letting you move faster, though for 95% of the game, you can only summon her by finding one of these horseshoe flowers, which is stupid, but you can use any item when riding on her now, which is nice. In the wolf form, you can't ride her, but you can warp and do this little dash for an extra boost of speed. And after a certain point of the game, you gain the ability to switch between forms at will, which is nice, though every time you warp, you end up in wolf form, and you can't transform if there's anyone else looking at you, which I find extremely stupid. If Majora's Mask characters can see me turn into a fish guy, I think Twilight Princess characters should be able to see me turn into an oversized dog. But now let's talk more about the dungeons, which is where this game really shines. A lot of people say Twilight Princess has some of the best dungeons in the series, and I'm pretty inclined to agree. There's 1 or 2 that aren't that great, but the majority are really solid. Despite having some repeated themes from previous games, they really do a lot of unique and cool stuff. stuff. While the game's art style doesn't work as well for the overworld stuff, for dungeons it can be really effective in giving them this more ancient and dangerous vibe. And while they can be pretty long, it feels like you're almost always moving or making progress, so the pacing is a lot better than in the Wind Waker. There's also this Ukuku, which you can find to let you warp in and out of dungeons. The dungeons are also a lot more forgiving than previously. Health is pretty plentiful, and if you die, you don't go back to the start like in the earlier games. You just respawn in whatever room you're in, which is really nice given how long some of these places can be, though you only have 3 hearts when you die. Some of them even have heart pieces you can find, which is good because now you need to grab 5 to get an extra heart container instead of 4, which I don't understand. And the boss fights are a lot easier too, thanks to the more refined combat system and the fact that many of them just straight up let you get more health. And I'm not gonna complain because I love Twilight Princess's boss fights. Despite being much easier, they are extremely cool, and there's a lot more variety than in the earlier games.
Overall, this game is a really refined experience that fixes a lot of issues from the older Zelda games, though it also has a couple issues that really bring it down for me, and one of those things is the length.
While the pacing is much better than Wind Waker's, this game can still feel a little long at points, particularly in the first half of the game. I already talked about how long the opening is, but that's not the only part guilty of this. The first half of the game especially can take a really long time to get through, mainly because you have to do a bunch of steps in order to just get to the dungeons. For starters, each area is covered in twilight, and to fix it, you need to find the guardian of each area, and they'll give you a vessel of light. You then need to roam around the area and find 16 of these bugs that are thankfully marked on the map, and kill them to get a part of their soul, or whatever these are supposed to be. Then everything turns back to normal, and you can actually interact with the characters, but even that can range from just talking with a couple to making a bunch of pointless detours and roaming between areas, which can get annoying. Thankfully, the second half of the game eases up on these, but it can still take a while to get to where you need to go. And the dungeons, like I said, can go on for pretty long. They don't feel as long as Wind Waker, but they can still take a while, which adds up by the time you finish the whole game. 3D Zelda games have always been long, but they just kept getting longer and longer, so if you're gonna play Twilight Princess, you gotta be ready to play it for a while. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I did find myself getting a little drained by the end of it. As for other issues with the game, I did have a couple of control problems. There were some parts where I didn't grab a ledge, which was really annoying. Sometimes I couldn't kill an enemy because I kept hitting the wall for some reason. The Z targeting can be a little screwy, and you have to make sure you're holding the correct direction while climbing or you can end up going the wrong way. These things didn't happen often, but there was an occasional problem here and there. Also, every time you save and quit the game and then reload, the game feels the need to stop when you collect a rupee that isn't green. Yeah, I know how much they're worth. Can we please just get a move on already? I guess all that's really left to talk about is the characters. Well, like I hinted at earlier, this game tries to have a much more expansive cast with Link's home village, and they are all extremely forgettable. Like, I will always remember characters like Saria, Maida, or Link's grandma, but I barely remember any of these guys. I mean, off the top of my head, there's Mallow, because he looks like a fusion of a baby and a grown man, and later ends up running a shop you can donate to. Ilya has some plot relevance, and yeah, that's about it. And the designs for most of the plot and point characters are really generic, which is odd because most of the one-offs are much more unique. These characters I actually do remember, like the clown guys who run mini-games at the lake, or Giovanni, a guy who was consumed by his greed and turned into a gold statue, so you have to collect Poe's souls to save him, kinda like the gold Skulltulas. The postman who delivers you letters, and this girl named Agatha, who is a self-proclaimed princess of bugs. She just gives you some upgrades if you collect golden bugs, and I'm convinced she has a literal fetish for these things given the way she talks about them. Ew. As for our heroes, Midna, like I said, is a great character. Zelda honestly doesn't do that much, but she has her moments, and Link is fine. He's nowhere near as expressive as he was in Wind Waker, but he does show more emotion than on the N64. And I like to point out how when Link picks up a dog or a cat, he actually carries it properly in his arms, which is absolutely adorable. Although the Cuckoos are back, so now it's time to finally get my revenge. Come here, you stupid little thing. Come here! I'm gonna finally slaughter you, you little... Huh? Now, I'm controlling the Cuckoo. What?
This is completely shaping my reality. Maybe I was wrong to declare war on those birds.
After Midna returns you to Ordon, you have to sneak into 2 separate houses to get both the Ordon shield and the Ordon sword. Then you can speak with Ordana and get the Vessel of Light to begin our first light hunting adventure across the Faron Woods, which thankfully doesn't take too long. Once that's taken care of, a monkey steals your lantern and you have to follow it through this fog to get it back, which wastes all of the oil that I just bought. After that, go to where Tallow was trapped and we finally reach our first dungeon, the Forest Temple. It's a decent enough opening dungeon with a pretty fun idea. You have to find and save all of the monkeys that have been imprisoned and then use them to get around by grabbing and swinging onto them, which is fun, though using these exploding bugs can be kind of annoying. There's a mini-boss fight against a baboon that requires rolling into the pole he's on, causing him to get hit with the boomerang, and beating it lets you take the Gale Boomerang. You mainly use this to blow propellers and move bridges. The boss is Diababa. It's basically a multi-headed Deku Baba plant that tries to bite you. At first you want to use the boomerang to send the bomb bugs flying into their mouths, and then when its true head pops up, the monkey will bring you bombs, which you also have to send flying into the mouth. mouths. Once you get both, you can slash the main head with your sword. It's pretty fun. After destroying it, you get this thing, and Midna says it's a fused shadow, which is what she's looking for. Apparently, this is what will allow Link to match Xanth's power, so we need to find the other two. After that, we're told to leave the woods and find another land covered in twilight. So we depart to Hyrule Field and find some pretty quickly. Link picks up the scent of his friends and follows it to Kakariko Village, though you have to do some warping shenanigans to put this bridge back. In the village, we find another Light Guardian and have to restore it again. And this one takes a lot longer, since many of them are in houses, which can be tricky to get inside, and even up a goddamn mountain. You also just straight up burn someone's house down. Well, sacrifices must be made. We see the spirits of Link's friends along with some of the village residents hiding from the monsters, and Colin has faith that Link will save them. Once the place is restored, we meet Aidan, who says the fused shadow is at the top of Death Mountain, home of the Gorons. Link reunites with his friends, minus Ilia, and learns they were taken in by the shaman named Renato, who asks him to bring them back to Ordon. But first you need to climb up here just to get knocked off by a Goron, go back and talk with the shaman, who says to bring them to the mayor, then see Epona come running through and hop on her to calm her down, and then ride back to Ordon to speak with the mayor.
See, this is what I meant when I said this game has some really unnecessary detours, many of which can also be pretty cryptic, so yeah, I got lost way more times than I like to admit.
The mayor says that to get past the Gorons, we need to be strong enough, so he teaches us how to sumo wrestle. Basically just hold the A button to grab and then push forward on the joystick. After that, he gives you the iron boots, and you go back to Kakariko Village, which is attacked. Colin sacrifices himself to save Beth, and he gets captured, so you need to chase after them to get him back. Some horse clashing takes place, we have a jousting match on this bridge, get this cool shot, and Colin is saved. He says he realizes that when his dad said to be strong like Link, he meant he should be brave. Well, that's the end of that storyline. Up Death Mountain we go. The Gorons come rolling at you, and you need to wear the iron boots and then grab them to throw them out of the way. Then you use them to launch yourself up. Eventually you meet this elder Goron named Gor Karon, who's filling in for their proper leader. To pass, you have to beat him in a sumo match and make sure you have the iron boots equipped. When you win, he says the other elders went to make sure their sacred treasure is protected, so we make our way into the Goron mines. It's another lava cave, but the mining machinery can make for some pretty cool puzzles, like using the iron boots to walk upside down and on walls, though the stomping noise gets annoying pretty quickly. You need to find the Goron elders to get shards of the big key in order to fight the boss. The mini-boss is a cursed Goron that you fight on this tilting metallic platform, so you gotta throw him off of it, and then you get the hero's bow. The boss is a flaming monster named Pyrus, and you shoot him in the eye with the bow, pull on his chains while wearing the boots to trip him, and then you can slash. Simple, but neat. We get the next fused shadow, and Midna tells us Xanth's name, and that he'll never be her king, but she doesn't really trust Zelda either. Outside, we're told to cross the North Bridge, and Colin asks Link to save Ilia. We can also go into this bomb shop to purchase a bomb bag, and Mallow shop to purchase a Hylian shield, and you want this because the wooden shield will burn up if hit by fire. Once you cross the bridge, it gets hijacked, and I think that'll be fine. We find Ilia's scent, and follow it to Hyrule Castle Town. We see her spirit in this bar looking over an injured Zora boy along with the bartender, then find the soldier group who mentioned something about Lake Hylia, so we should probably check it out. Though you have to go the long way and then literally jump off a bridge. In the lake, Zora spirits mention how the water's all dried up, and after fighting some random monsters, you get picked up by a bird and have to fly up a river by steering the bird with the pointer. And still better than flying with Spirit Airlines. After that, we find Zora's domain, which has been frozen over, and you need to climb up this frozen waterfall and then do the most logical solution of teleporting to Death Mountain and bring this giant lava spike back to thaw them out.
Please tell me I am not the only one who had no idea this thing would be important and had to look it up.
We then see the spirit of Rutella, the Zora Queen, who was publicly executed by the dark monsters when they invaded. Jesus, that's dark. She sent her son Rawless to Hyrule Castle for help, but he seems to be in danger, so she asks us to save him in exchange for some enhanced water abilities. The water is flowing again, so ride the river down to Lake Hylia and we meet the final guardian. Collecting these lights sucks, since it isn't just confined to one area, it's all over the province, which takes forever, especially since the last one requires killing this giant bug thing. After that, we meet Linnayru, who gives us some backstory via this trippy sequence. The three goddesses gave equal power to the people of the land, and their home was regarded as the sacred realm. But then evil people tried to seize the forbidden power for themselves, so the light spirits sealed it away in the form of the fused shadows. They then warn Link that those who don't know the danger of wielding power may end up being ruled by it. We then have to head back to Hyrule Castle Town and enter the bar. A doctor says he can't treat a Zora, and Ilia doesn't seem to recognize Link. The bartender says the shaman and Kakariko can help, but the soldiers are cowards, so we have to bring him there instead. And she reveals that Ilia has amnesia, but that's a more minor issue for now. We have to escort this carriage by riding along the path and taking out any monsters that come by while preventing it from being destroyed. After that, the shaman treats Rawless and says he'll be fine, though he's unaware of his mother's fate. Colin offers to stay with him until he recovers, and he learns about Ilia's amnesia. The bartender introduces herself as Telma, and she says that she's part of a group that's trying to help Hyrule, which will be mildly important later. We then follow the spirit of Rutella to this graveyard where she thanks us for saving Rawless and gives you the Zora armor, allowing you to swim and breathe underwater. Head back to Lake Hylia and swim to the bottom to reach Lake Bed Temple after getting some water bombs. This is easily my least favorite dungeon in the game. You gotta use bomb arrows to blow up stalactites pots, which can be a problem because for whatever reason, this game doesn't let you get bombs in pots or from defeated enemies. You can only restock by buying them or finding them in chests. But on top of that, there's the center room where you reorganize the staircase, water streams you gotta open up, and a weirdly large amount of rooms. I seriously spent 2 hours in this place. It sucked. And people say the water temple is a pain. The mini-boss is a giant frog that bounces around and has a weak tongue, which isn't easy to hit. You get the claw shot, and then you have to deal with these moving platforms, which take forever. The boss is Morpheal, and the fight is entirely underwater. The first phase, it sends out fish and slams its watery tentacles down on you, so you have to yank these eyes out of the tentacles with the claw shot. The second phase, it begins moving and you gotta swim after it so you can latch on and then just stab it over and over again in the neck. Not hard, but it can go on for a long time. After that, you get the final fused shadow, but upon leaving, Zant is there waiting.
Did he just show up recently, or has he been standing there that whole time?
He lays a curse on the place, turning Link back into his wolf form, takes the faded shadows and tosses them aside, and then mocks Midna, calling her a traitor. He claims his powers were given him by his god, and puts a curse on Link. He tells Midna that light and darkness will meet at last, and asks for her help, but when she refuses, he blasts her and sends both of them back to the light world. Midna's on death's door, so we need to head back into the castle to find Zelda. Sneak up this window of Telma's bar and make your way through the sewers to get back up. Midna begs Zelda to lift the curse put on Link, but she says he needs to head to the Sacred Grove and find the Master Sword. Midna's final wish is for Zelda to help him find something called the Mirror of Twilight, but Zelda says she shouldn't suffer for their mistakes. So she uses the Triforce of Wisdom to infuse herself with Midna and save her life despite her protests. We head back to the Faron Woods and hop across this gorge to reach the Sacred Grove. Though to get through, you have to follow the Skull Kid by listening to his music and attacking him while he drops an infinite supply of skeletons on you, and then you have this little arena match where you only hit him when he summons more, and god, this is annoying. Eventually, you finally reach the temple and howl Zelda's lullaby to awaken these statues, which you have to move to their original spots via pointing them in the right direction simultaneously. Either you end up using a guide for this, or you're a filthy liar. This opens the door, allowing you to finally claim the Master Sword, which returns Link to his human form. Though Midna holds onto the curse in the form of this crystal, so you can turn back whenever you want. Midna then asks Link to help her find the Mirror of Twilight, since it's the only thing that can stop Zant. From this point on, to figure out where you're going, you need to head back to Telma's bar because one of her crew members just so happens to be investigating your next location, and you get the point by looking at this map. In this case, we need to find the desert, but to get there, we go back to Lake Hylia, talk to the crew member named Aru in a crow's nest to get a letter, and then talk to this clown who will blast you over to Gerudo Desert. Here, Midna tells us that the people who tried to conquer the Sacred Realm all those years ago were banished into a world of shadows that became known as the Twilight Realm, and she's a descendant of those people. It was a peaceful place until Zant took over, turned all of the Twilight into shadow monsters, and then banished her. So now she needs the Mirror of Twilight to get back. Make her way across the desert, shoot these guys in towers, and hijack one of their boars to slam through this fence. Then you find a camp where you repeat those steps alongside fighting this giant goblin guy with an axe that literally takes 3 hearts with a single hit.
Would you believe me if I said this is the most dangerous enemy in the game?
Go through here and reach the Arbiter's Grounds, which is one of the coolest dungeons in Zelda history. This whole thing really feels like an ancient sandy tomb with all kinds of creepy spirit enemies, and it's awesome. You have to track down these 4 posts to open the door in the center, fight skeletons that need to be blown up, and avoid quicksand. The mini-boss is a giant Poe that requires bomb arrows to kill, and you get the spinner, which allows for some really cool level design. This culminates in one of the most epic boss fights in the series. After Zant shows up to taunt you, he awakens this giant skeleton monster known as Star-Lord. So first, you just gotta use the spinner to hit him in the spine while avoiding the enemies he summons and trying not to sink into the quicksand. He goes down pretty easily, right? Well, not really, because once he's initially defeated, you use the spinner to raise this tower, and then the head starts floating and knocks you off. So now you have to ride the spinner along these tracks while jumping back and forth to dodge fireballs and spinning blades until you get close enough to jump into him, and then you can hack away. This is such a cool fight, and a prime example of why this game's boss fights work. They're not super challenging, but they have such a great sense of scale and energy to them that you can't help but have a great time. After killing him for real this time, you exit the dungeon and arrive at the Mirror Chamber. Fight off some shadow beasts, and oh, would you look at that, the Mirror of Twilight has been shattered, and we only have one piece of it. Who could have possibly seen that coming? We then see a group of sages that were meant to protect the mirror. They are clearly bad at their job, and they say it was shattered by magic that can only belong to one person: Ganondorf. It turns out he also tried to invade the Sacred Realm many years ago, but he was captured by the sages, so they tried to execute him, but since he managed to acquire the Triforce of Power, they were unable to. So he was instead banished to the Twilight Realm, but now he's given his power to Zant. So yeah, Zant's pretty much just been a minion of Ganondorf this whole time, which is kinda lame if you ask me, given how this is the first time Ganondorf is mentioned in the entire game. I mean, at least Aghanim made it clear he was a pawn right from the start. It turns out that only the true leader of the Twilight can fully destroy the mirror, so we need to find the 3 remaining pieces. One is in a snowy mountain, one is in an ancient grove, Grove, and one is in the heavens. So like I said, we head back to the bar and get the location of the mountains, which are next to Zora's domain. Break open this wall and speak to this girl named Ashi, who tells us a story about a beast carrying a red fish. So we need to go back to the graveyard in Kakariko Village and speak with Rallis, who will tell you where to find one of those and give you his coral earring to use as a fish hook. Catch a red fish, sniff it, and then follow the scent up the mountain to eventually find a Yeti. It turns out that he has the mirror piece and offers to show you, so you gotta slide down the mountain on a chunk of ice, because even Zelda wasn't immune to the 2000 snowboard minigame curse. At the bottom of the trail, you reach the Snow Peak Ruins, which is an extremely unique dungeon since it's actually the Yeti's home. The Yeti's wife says they've been infested with monsters, and she isn't feeling well, so you basically have to run around to each location she marks on your map, and instead of the piece, you find an ingredient to this soup her husband is making to make her feel better, which is ridiculous, but also pretty sweet. And you can eat the soup, which restores more health with each ingredient. Aside from that, it's an ice dungeon, which is a mixed bag. You get the ball and chain here, which is awesome, since it lets you smash these ice chunks, but the enemies can be kind of annoying. There's a lot of these cannons, which take forever to fire, since some cannonballs have to be transported with these weird lever things, and it's home to the most annoying mini-boss in the game. This knight that swings the ball and chain around, and you have to hookshot over him, dodge, and then hit him in the back. Problem is, actually hitting him is a total crapshoot, and it's really easy to take damage. This part pissed me off so much. It's lucky you immediately get a great new item. Eventually, the wife feels better and lets you into the bedroom, where the mirror turns her into an ice monster named Blizzetta. It slides around the room, and then begins floating and dropping ice crystals on you. All you gotta do is slide around and swing the ball and chain into it. It's decent, and the only boss fight in the game where you don't actually use your sword, so that's unique. Eventually, we get the shard, and the Yeti comes in to care for his wife, who's thankfully back to normal, and they share a nice tender moment. Now that is couple goals. Back to the bar, and then we return to the Sacred Grove, where Russell is waiting, and instead of midden jumping, we have to glide across the gap with his golden cuckoo.
Yeah, I knew I couldn't trust these things.
Back in the grove, and oh come on, really? You have to do the Skull Kid chase again? This wasn't even fun the first time. Once you reach the center, you need to pop the sword back in its pedestal, which removes the statue, allowing you to enter this weird door. Stepping through brings you here, and these stairs lead to the Temple of Time. This place is all about climbing up so you can get the Dominion Rod and then take control of the statue to bring it back down and open this door. A simple yet amusing idea, and you can take control of these things too, which I did not realize at first. A lot of the puzzles revolve around different machinery, and smashing stuff with the statue's hammer is fun. Plus the music has this cool techno vibe to it. The mini-boss is just a dark nut use sword duel, which we will be seeing more of later, and the boss is Armo Goma. I don't have arachnophobia, and even I think this is gross. This honestly might be the easiest boss in the game. Just slash the babies it drops, shoot the eye with an arrow, and then take control of these statues to pound it. Hell, the second phase is even easier since you just run after it and slash, which is honestly pretty funny. We get the next mirror shard, and outside speak with Ukuku, who says the Dominion Rod needs more power to reach the sky. We'll worry about that later. Right now, we go back to the bar and then head to Kakariko Village. The shaman says they can restore Ilia's memory if they work their way backwards from when she was kidnapped, and this is important since she mentions something about the Dominion Rod. The following sequence is a giant fetch quest that's honestly really annoying. You need to go back to Telma, then speak with this doctor, then follow the scent of some medicine to speak with this cat, fight these skeleton guys at night in front of town to get this wooden statue, bring the statue to Ilia, and she'll remember it was given to her by the person who saved her. The Goron mentions a hidden village, so we gotta go find it, then clear out all the monsters, talk to this old lady to get Ilia's charm, bring the charm back to Ilia, which helps her remember everything, and she'll give it to you because it lets you summon Epona whenever you want. Really would have preferred it if you got this earlier and not right before the last major dungeon. Now you go back to the hidden village and show the old lady the Dominion Rod, so she'll give you the ancient sky book, go back to the shaman's place again and speak with this guy named Chad who's doing research on the heavens, show him the book and he'll read from it, which unintentionally awakens power in the rod. Then you have to find 6 other statues and move them to reawaken its full power, then go back and speak with them again so you can move this statue and find the ancient cannon, warp it over to Lake Hylia and speak with this clown who will fix it for 300 rupees, and then you can finally shoot yourself out of the cannon to reach City in the Sky. Was all of that really necessary? And for me it was even worse since I had to do an hour of rupee farming since I made the mistake of donating to Mallow. You're going on the list. This place largely revolves around gliding with Ukukus and using the claw shot to get around, plus it's where you get the second one, which is awesome. I love the aesthetic and concept, though the downside is that there is a lot of waiting around doing nothing. This is another dungeon that took me a couple hours to get through. The mini-boss is a flying lizard you need to claw shot when he raises his shield. The boss is a giant dragon named Argarok. That is a cool name. Use the double claw shot to climb these pillars, latch onto his tail, and then equip the iron boots to weigh him down. Then use these pea hats to avoid his fire, latch onto his head, and just stab him over and over again. Another simple but cool one. We get the final shard and head back to the mirror chamber. Here we fix the mirror and open the portal to the Twilight Realm. The sages apologize for sending Ganondorf to them and call Midna the Twilight Princess, meaning she's the rightful ruler of the Twilight. She then reveals that she fled the realm once Zant took over and turned her into this little imp. Apparently they believed their hero would come in the form of a divine beast. Write that down, write that down, write that down. So when she saw Link, she figured he could help them. And while she initially didn't care what happened to the light world, Link and Zelda's sacrifices have inspired her to do the right thing. Plus, if they defeat Zant, she might be able to save Zelda. So we head through the portal and enter the Palace of Twilight, where we actually see some of the Twilight. You have to go down 2 different hallways and grab these light balls to bring them to the front, but these 2 hands will try to grab them and put them back. After that, you charge up the Master Sword with light, letting you slash through this dark fog and destroy enemies instantly. Then you gotta ride light platforms and fight a bunch of Zant masks. At the top, we finally find Zant, who decides to actually have a personality now as he goes from a stoic walking statue to a spazzing crazy lunatic. He just comes right the hell out of nowhere, but hey, it's the most interesting he's been throughout the whole game. He talks about how their people shouldn't have been locked away, and he was hoping he would be able to rule over the Twilight somehow, but he never got to be able to. So he turned to the heavens and found his god, that being Ganondorf. Ganondorf bestowed his powers onto Zant in exchange for merging the 2 realms to free him.
See, this is what I was talking about earlier. Zant has basically no motivation for the vast majority of the game until the very end, where they try and give him something and just make him a power-hungry lunatic that's really just a pawn for Ganondorf, which is kind of underwhelming if you ask me.
Thankfully, his boss fight is pretty cool. He flashes through some of the old dungeons, and you have to block his shots and hit him with whatever item you used on that boss. The boomerang, the claw shot, the ball and chain, and it culminates in him running around in a field and having a glorified sword duel. It's pretty fun. After beating him, Midna regains some of her power, and he claims the curse on her can't be broken, so she pops him like a frickin' balloon. Well, he's dead, but we still have to save Zelda, so it's back to Hyrule Castle. Midna finally uses the fused shadow to awaken her full power and break the barrier on the castle. We head inside and have to go around the courtyard killing enemies, including the Axe Goblin from earlier, who Midna is surprised to see can actually talk. Then enter the castle, and I like how you actually used most of the items you've gotten throughout the game. You fight a bunch of strong enemies, and Telma's crew even shows up at one point to help you, which is the most significant thing they actually do in the entire game. And it's still not much. But in the throne room, we find Zelda's body, who's being held by Ganondorf. He insults Midna's people, but thanks them for allowing him to escape, and talks about how he has the power of the gods thanks to the Triforce, but Midna says she'll do everything to stop him. He then proceeds to possess Zelda's body and use her as a puppet, which is one of the freakiest moments in any Zelda game ever. This fight is mainly just playing energy deflection like in the older games, with the occasional charge or area attack you need to dodge. And this is the only point in the game where the motion controls were a problem, since I kept doing an extra swing by accident, which threw off my timing. After enough hits, Midna purges him from Zelda's body, but then he transforms into Ganon, which I know is supposed to look like a beast, but I just think this looks ridiculous. He just charges around and pops out of portals. You need to shoot him in the face with an arrow and then slash him in the chest, but after a while you need to become a wolf and then sumo wrestle him, which we literally haven't done in 20 hours by this point. Once that fight is done, Midna is able to fully restore Zelda, who thanks her for everything, but Ganondorf isn't done yet, so Midna warps Link and Zelda out of there. An explosion occurs, and Ganondorf parallels that shot of Link on his horse from earlier, which is really cool, but concerning. Zelda summons the power of the light arrows, so we need to chase down Ganondorf on horseback so she can shoot him and then we can slash him. But we're still not done, since Ganondorf creates this wall around him and Link, so it all comes down to a one-on-one sword duel. Just avoid the attacks and slash him when you can. The only thing unique is that he'll sometimes charge you and you have to hit the A button to do a sword clash and then mash it, which will let you score more hits. This entire final boss sequence goes on for a while, and some parts aren't great, but others are pretty cool. In the end, you're able to deliver the finishing blow and stab Ganondorf directly through the chest. He loses the power of the Triforce and finally dies. The Light Guardians appear and lift the curse on Midna, restoring her to her true form, which I can't tell if I like or not. Then the credits roll as we see everyone's lives slowly return to normal. About halfway through, Midna says goodbye to Link and Zelda says that the goddesses must have left the Mirror of Twilight because it was destiny that they would meet. Midna thanks them for their kindness, but then proceeds to destroy the mirror as she returns to the Twilight Realm for good. More credits show more people, and Link finally returns home to Ordon. The last thing we see is the statue of the goddesses and the Triforce.
Twilight Princess is a great game. It keeps a lot of the fantastic elements from the previous Zelda games while also greatly refining the combat and giving us an amazing selection of dungeons, though I think the story and characters aren't anything too special, with the exception of Midna. Progressing in the overworld can be obnoxious, and a lot of it goes on for longer than it needs to. So it's not my favorite Zelda game, but it is probably in the top 5 somewhere, so I do understand why some people say it's their favorite, and actually, I was wrong about earlier. It does have a pretty big distinction from the other 3D Zelda games. It's the only game in the series to be rated T for teen, which explains that one part where Agatha drops an F-bomb. Hey, you got one, might as well use it.